This is attorney Shellon Washington, owner and founder of the Washington Law Firm located at 455 Utica Avenue in Brooklyn, New York. We're specialized in medical malpractice, personal injuries, matrimonial law, and landlord and tenant. If you're in need of legal representation, please give us a call today. The number to call is 718-877-3100. Consultation is free at no cost to you. So call us today to see if we can be of any assistance to your legal needs. Again, the phone number to call us is 718-877-3100.
All right, we say hi to you guys. This is the first edition of the Law and You, and of course, it is with no stranger, attorney at law, Shellon Washington is with us. Good evening to you, Miss Washington. How are you?
Good evening, Mark, and good evening to all of the viewers. I'm well. Thank you for asking.
Yeah, this here, the Law and You, it's basically where you will talk a little bit about your practice, a little about what you do, and you will give out some information, and hopefully folks will be able to get in touch with you in the New York area. But before that, again, just give us a quick rundown, a brief biography of Shellon Washington.
Hi, Mark. Well, as some of your viewers who may know me, I am originally from Linden in Guyana, the small mining town of Linden. I have two high school that I attended. I attended Wismer Silver City Secondary School, and then I also attended Mackenzie High School. And then I attended the University of Guyana, where I got my LLB. I also attended UWorden Law School, and then I migrated to the United States, where I attended University of Miami. I have an LLM from the University of Miami, and I've been practicing in New York since 2008 to current. My specialization is tort, all forms of tort, including personal injuries and damage to property, and medical malpractice. I'm also specialized in matrimonial, and I do also practice some amount of landlord and tenant.
Yes, absolutely. You heard that there. Attorney at law Shellon Washington is going to just walk us through of some of the things that she do in terms of areas of practice in this new edition right here on 107.1 FM, The Law and You. Tell us a little bit more in terms of, well, before we get into the areas in which you practice, you also are licensed. You are licensed to practice in Guyana, New York, Trinidad and Tobago. Where else are those things?
Yeah, that's pretty much it. I'm licensed to practice in Guyana, Trinidad, and the state of New York. I also do limited practice through what is called a pro hac vice in the state of New Jersey. Um, that's pretty much it. I've been licensed pretty much in Guyana and Trinidad since 2003, and my license in New York started in 2006.
All right. Before we get into the areas in terms of you do matrimonial law, landlord and tenant, and also medical malpractice, we want to get into those areas. But recently, I know and I've read that you were part of a case out in Buffalo, New York. Can you tell us a little bit about this case here with this young man where his family is seeking justice, Tyler Lewis?
That's right, Mark. This case is a mysterious, very mysterious case. The circumstances surrounding this young student's death, it still remains a mystery. The family has retained me in the civil aspect of this case, so I'm currently handling the civil aspect against the state of New York. I filed in the Court of Claims because, as you know, any claim against the state of New York has to go through the Court of Claims. This young man here was stabbed. He died by a single stab wound to the chest on the university at Buffalo. And it wasn't clear the circumstances under which he died. Based on the information I've received, and I've not seen a copy of the autopsy report as yet, but based on the information I received, there are no marks, other marks of violence. There's no indication of any struggle taking place. Neither was there any evidence that he was involved in a struggle or an altercation. But as you know, a few weeks ago, the DA, the district attorney of the Erie County in Buffalo, he came out and he did a press conference, and what he is alluding to are facts which he claims are pointing towards some sort of case of self-defense. But you know, I'm not an expert on criminal law, so I don't want to venture into those allegations made by the Erie County DA. But those allegations, the truth will come out eventually. And we just have to keep our eyes out. And you know, the family are still investigating. They have a tip line where people can call and give information. And so far, they've made a lot of strides. People have called in and provided information, informing them that they know who the person was that stabbed this young student whose life was wrongfully cut short. And I believe the state of New York should be held accountable and responsible for the death of this student. I think they failed him, regardless of what they're alleging the circumstances are surrounding his death. They failed him because if you have a campus where, based on the information coming from the DA, illegal activities are being carried out on that campus, I think it's not safe. And I think they need to alert other families that, you know, you need to be on the alert. Your children are not safe on that campus because there's information coming from the very DA's office that illegal activities were taking place. And as I understand, the person who was involved in the stabbing or the wrongful death of the student, he was expelled from the school. And the question is, how was he allowed to even get back on the campus at the University of Buffalo? How was he allowed access? Why was he there? It just lends to tell me, or it gives me an indication that there's no proper security there, because if you expel a student, there must be measures to ensure that that student is not ever allowed on the campus. And I think the expelling of that student came about because of allegations or evidence that he was engaging in illegal activities on the campus. Yet he was allowed back on the campus and allowed to wrongfully take the life of a young student, and yet he's not being held accountable. And we're getting information coming from the DA's office that it was 5 against 1, but I'm not sure how the DA is going to substantiate that. I'm not sure that they've released the information yet to the public, but my office is seeking subpoenas to get all the evidence and all the records that they've gotten so far that have led the DA's office to make a conclusion that no one should be charged in the wrongful death of Tyler Lewis. The family are going to get justice eventually. I mean, the road to justice is sometimes a very long road. And this appears to be the case here, that this is a very, very long road to justice. We've seen many situations where a Black life doesn't matter, where the DAs refused in many instances because the perpetrator of the crime was white or Caucasian, and they've refused to take the appropriate actions against the perpetrator. And this appears to be the case here, where the DA's office is alleging they're making a defense for the alleged perpetrator. I've never seen this before, Mark, where a district attorney would come out and give a defense for the perpetrator. My thoughts were the DA's, their function or their job is to find evidence to prosecute. But in this case, it looks like the DA is on the side of the alleged perpetrator.
Suspicious. Suspicious indeed. You were about to say something because...
Yes, and therefore, I think what we're doing is just pressing to get justice in the civil aspect. I'm not able to do the DA's job, obviously, but what I can do is try to get, some sort of compensation in terms of civil liability against the state of New York, for the family of Tyler Lewis, the late Tyler Lewis.
All right, we wish you all the best in this case, and we want the mother, and others who have been crying out for justice for a while now, that they will get justice eventually. I know there was a protest march there. It says Justice for Tyler just about 2 weeks ago. Members of the public were out there. You were out there as well, and let us just keep this case on the front burner, so to speak. You also deal with other police matters from a civil standpoint. I guess sometime last month there was a case of which if I'm allowed to mention, a case with a police shooting death of a young Guyanese man out in Florida.
Right, Mark. And that's another case we're trying to get attention to. The victim of that, for that case, is a young man, Guyanese descent. His parents are Guyanese, and he went out to Florida. He was working there, and his life was cut short. The circumstances surrounding his death are very, very suspicious. It was a cover up. I'm going to talk about that a little bit later, because I would like people to know who he was. I would like people to know his name, and I would like people to know and to call the district attorney in Florida, in that county where this incident took place, and ask them to prosecute the police officers who were responsible for the wrongful death of that victim. Mark, as I said earlier, I do tort cases. So this is a wrongful death case. So it's a form of tort. So that's anything to do with police. It has to be involved some sort of wrong against my client for me to get involved. I'm not a criminal attorney, but anything to do with civil wrong, I'm there.
Absolutely. You're watching this new program, The Law and You, with Attorney at Law Shellon Washington. We'll take a quick break and we'll come back. We want to hear some of the areas that you practice. And of course, folks who are watching, feel free to make contact with Attorney Shellon Washington's office. It's located in New York, Brooklyn, New York, 455 Utica Avenue. And her telephone number, office number, is 718-877-3100. We'll take a quick break and we'll be right back with more of Attorney at Law, Shellon Washington, and The Law and You. We'll be right back.
So, this is Attorney Shellon Washington, owner and founder of the Washington Law Firm, located at 455 Utica Avenue in Brooklyn, New York. We're specialized in medical malpractice, personal injuries, matrimonial law, and landlord and tenant. If you're in need of legal representation, please give us a call today. The number to call is 718-877-3100. Consultation is free at no cost to you. So call us today to see if we can be of any assistance to your legal needs. Again, the phone number to call us is 718-877-3100.
All right, welcome back. The Law and You with Attorney at Law, Shellon Washington. Miss Washington, I know this is our inaugural. Well, it's actually your show. Some nights you will be on just by yourself, but I just thought that I ask you a few questions and just about we touched how you do matrimonial law. Tell us a little bit about that and how important it is.
Yes, Mark, I'm glad you touched on that particular law because a lot of folks here are of Guyanese descent, and a lot of my clients who come for divorce, they are Guyanese. And one of the issues that always comes up in the matrimonial cases is people having property in Guyana and they're living in New York. Both husband and wives, in many instances, they might have migrated many years ago, but prior to migrating, they might have purchased a property in Guyana, or they may have purchased a property recently, and then they get to divorce court. They want to separate because the marriage is obviously not working out. And the issue that comes up often, and which they want to be litigated here, is to have the property division of the division of the property in Guyana be dealt with the courts over here. And another issue too is very often Guyanese tend to go back to Guyana to file for divorce, even though they're living here and they've been here for many years. They're working here, they file taxes here. And I've seen this over and over where they go to Guyana and allege that the parties are domiciled or one of them are domiciled in Guyana, and therefore that entitles them in Guyana to file a divorce. Let me warn some of you right now, if you are living in the state of New York, both spouses, and one of you decides to go purchase a property in Guyana, and then your intentions are later in life to remigrate to Guyana, but prior to remigrating, you decide you're going to file for a divorce and you go to Ghana. I want you to know right now, if any one of you, if your spouse comes to me, if you go file in Ghana, your spouse comes to me, first thing I'm going to do is file a motion to dismiss that case in Ghana. Fortunately for me, I'm licensed both countries. I'm licensed in Ghana, even though I'm not allowed to advertise that license in Guyana, but I'm allowed to advertise the one here. If the spouse comes and the other party who went and filed in Guyana, I'm going to file a motion to dismiss. The reason being is New York would have the closest connection to that case. A forum in Guyana, regardless of the way they define domicile in Guyana, you have no business, if you're living in the state of New York, you have no business going to the courts of Guyana, approaching those courts and telling them that you're domiciled in Guyana. And I do understand that Guyana has a liberal interpretation of what domicile means. It goes towards a person's intent versus what the way we define domicile in New York. Domicile in New York is completely different. It's not just based on a person's intention, but it's based on all of the other factual circumstances, including where you're working, where you're paying taxes, where you have your permanent residency established. So if you choose to do that, immediately there's going to be a motion to dismiss if that spouse comes to my office. And the second thing is the courts in New York does not have jurisdiction to deal with matrimonial property in a different country. And I think this has been happening for far too long. Even here in the state of New York, real property any issues related to the real property has to be dealt with within the state or country where that property is located. And that goes for Guyana too. And I've been seeing multiple divorces where the courts here in New York has been meddling with real property in Guyana and making decisions that as it relates to those property. I want you to know that portion of those judgments are voidable. It could be voided because the courts here has no business meddling when it comes to real property because they don't know the real property law in those countries. They could deal with equitable distribution of assets as it relates to this country, but as it relates to real property in a foreign country, the court here has no business doing that. So matrimonial law it's a big thing, especially among Guyanese and even other countries that I file divorces for. A lot of my clients are from Caribbean countries, so a lot of them do maintain that connection with their home country, and a lot of them, ultimately intend to return back home and when they retire and set up their permanent residency. But there are a lot of issues I deal with on a daily basis as it relates to matrimonial law.
Attorney Shellon Washington, the law and you, is giving you a quick rundown on the areas of which she practices. And you feel free to give her a call. She is located in Brooklyn, New York. Her law office is on Utica Avenue. Our telephone number is running there at the bottom of the screen, 718-877-3100. Utica Avenue, that is, 455 Utica Avenue. Her office is located. All right, let's get back. You also do malpractice, right? Lots of malpractice around the New York, the tri-state area. How is that going? And break it down for our listeners, please.
Malpractice is a very, very technical area of law, and a lot of things that people believe is malpractice is not. So those cases are really scarce. I do have sometimes, from time to time, client would call and they would relay a situation, and they would automatically think it's malpractice. But malpractice could only be established through a medical expert. And I think a lot of people are not aware of that. It's a very costly type of litigation, very expensive, because upfront, the attorney has to hire an expert, and that doctor who specializes in whatever area you've been injured in, whether it is oncology, whether it's by your family physician, whether it is a surgeon in urology, whether it's whatever area that surgeon or that doctor is specialized in. The expert has to also be specialized in that area. So upfront, when you come and you said you have a medical malpractice issue, that is a very, very costly type of litigation, because it involves an expert from the beginning. And I think a lot of times people are not aware of that, because they see them, suffered some type of injury, and then they come to the office and they expect that we'll be able to just jump and get it done ASAP, but it doesn't work like that. It's a process which starts first by hiring an expert, and the expert has to give us their opinion as to whether or not they believe we have a strong case or not. And if that expert tells us that is not a case that is worth pursuing, then we cannot pursue that case regardless of what the litigant feels, because we rely heavily, and the courts also rely heavily on the testimony affidavit of expert witnesses in medical malpractice.
All right, well said. Attorney Shellon Washington is with us, and Law and You. During the pandemic, I have read about a lot of instances of breaking ups and divorces and so forth. Is there any truth to that? That during the almost 2 years, or a little over 2 years of the COVID-19 pandemic, when a lot of things seem to have shut down, that there was a rise in divorce cases?
Mark, to some extent, there was, because I think what happened is when you have two people who've been busy for most of their marriages, both parties most likely were working, or even if there was one stayed at home spouse and the other one was constantly out of the home working. And then, boom, the pandemic came and everyone was locked in together. And then is when a lot of people really got to see all of the bad and the dark side of their spouses. And I think during that time is when all of the real bad issues start surfacing. And then people started realizing that, it was really, really difficult to live with that person. A lot of it ended up indeed in divorces. Some people did seek counseling and they ended up back together. But yeah, there was a slight uptick in divorces during the pandemic. I think it just made people realize what they were living with all these years, but they just never took the time to spend an extensive or a lengthy time together in the same place. And that's what the pandemic did. It forced people to be together in the same place. And then whatever type of attitude the person might have had or habits, you were able to experience it to its fullest. And a lot of people couldn't deal with it. So they just opt to file for divorces.
All right, I'm glad that a lot of us have survived that. Not only the pandemic, but some of those issues you've just described. And let me ask you this question as it pertains to your law practice and the amount of years you have been practicing. What's really the passion you have when you fight for people's cases? Talk to us about your passion.
I think, Mark, I'm more passionate about justice, about seeing what is right being accomplished. I think one of the things people fail to realize is that the law is not always right, and the law does not always provide you with the correct approach to some things. But I'm more passionate about morals, about what is righteous. And a lot of times the law doesn't offer that. The law just offer you an excuse to get around something or get over it. And sometimes not every wrong is the law is able to remedy it properly. And I think I become passionate when I see there's a blatant wrong and it's not being remedied, and I want to see it remedied. And the other thing that gets me passionate and makes me want to go the extra mile is when I see judges who engage in any type of discrimination, any type of wrongdoing, and they use their platform, they use their office to perpetrate a wrong. Because I feel that judges are there for a reason. They're there to serve the community. They're there to see righteousness, to see justice. And a lot of times when I see a judge is blatantly erring, openly, without no concern that they can be checked, I like to see that judge, or I like to see people come into checks and balances with the law. So a lot of times, even though I don't appeal, sometimes I will take that route just to bring a judge in the right order, bring the judge in line. I mean, I can't physically do anything except go to the appellate court and have people bring into put them in check. The appellate court can do that for me. I can't do that myself. So that makes me passionate to want to see the right things done. And what I hate most is if I'm correct on the law, to have anybody try to tell me otherwise. And, I've experienced that in my career where I know that I'm absolutely 100% correct. And there's judges who will stand there and try to make you look like you're not correct. And that's where at times I will approach the appellate court and try to bring that judge back in line to comply with the law. I love to see justice done. I love the law. And one of the things that makes me more happy, Mark, is the federal court. The federal court is where I see mostly the judges, they follow the letter of the law. And I think nothing makes me more happy and more passionate than seeing a judge who follows the letter of the law and do what is right, what is just, and what is correct.
Absolutely. We need to see more of that. And as you speak of judges following the letter of the law, just something about Guyana came to mind. We need to see more of that in Guyana. But you also won a big case, I believe. Is it in the appellate division, New York's appellate division? Can you tell us a little bit about that as we move to wrap up tonight's inaugural episode of The Law and You with attorney at law, Shellon Washington?
Yes, Mark. That was a case where I appeared in a tort matter. It was my client was sued. He's a police officer, and he was sued by his ex-wife for certain tortious liabilities. And the complaint was never served on my client. The ex-wife knew where my client lived, yet when the process server went to serve, the process server approached the wrong address. They went to the address where the ex-wife was residing. She knows he doesn't live there, but yet the complaint was served there, knowing fully well my client would never receive that complaint. So I finally got in contact with the attorneys who were working on that case, and I told them my client wasn't served. And I told them, I was about to go on vacation. I said, when I return, we'll try to see how we can address this. But when I got back, Mark, the attorneys filed a motion against my client for default judgment because he had never entered an appearance. Obviously, he was never served. And the attorney for the plaintiff knew that my client was never served. And when they filed a motion for default, what I did is file a motion to dismiss. Because the law in the state of New York says you have 120 days after an action is filed to serve the summons and the complaint on the defendant. And if that time passed, the court says either court on its own motion or any party involved in the litigation file a motion to dismiss. And there's no discretion. The court doesn't have discretion. It says the court has to or must. That's what the CPLR says. The court must dismiss. And when I filed my motion, I knew I was 100% correct on the law. I even had a verbal showdown with the judge in the courtroom. I left everyone in silence looking at us because the judge was trying to tell me otherwise when I knew I was correct there. And even though he knew I was right, in the end, he tried to tell me that we should file a stipulation for the plaintiff to allow my client to enter an appearance and file an answer, and that the default against my client should be vacated. We should stipulate. But I didn't want to deal with the case, Mark, because I felt like the case was a waste of judicial resources. It's the type of case I don't feel like I don't want to discuss the facts of it, but I just feel like it's not the type of case anybody should be wasting time to file, whether it be a woman's scorn or whatever it is that prompted the wife to file that litigation. I felt like it was a waste of time. So after I refused, what the judge did is he went ahead and he granted my motion on condition that I must do a traverse hearing. A traverse hearing is where somebody it was served, but they're alleging that service was defective. In my case, I was not alleging that. I was just telling the court my client was not served, period. Not that he was served and the service was defective, but the judge ordered a traverse hearing. And just as I predicted that the referee who he appointed to do the traverse hearing would have ruled against my client, that's exactly what happened. But in the state of New York, Mark, when an order is granted, what the attorney either side has to do is file a notice of entry. And if the notice of entry is not filed, the time to file an appeal doesn't start to run until the notice of entry is filed. So once the referee did that, what I did is file a notice of entry to start the time to run to file an appeal, and I file appeal against the judge. I didn't even pay attention to the referee's decision because she was of no effect to me. I didn't want her. I wanted the judge to correct his wrong. I wanted him to remedy what he had done. So I filed an appeal against him and the appellate division. It was an historic win for me because on that particular date, it was an all-black panel of judges. So that was an historic win for me that the appellate division agreed with me and they granted my motion. They granted my appeal to vacate the judge's order that my client should be his motion should be granted on condition, and they granted it outright and dismissed the complaint against my client. So I think that was a major victory.
Congratulations on that victory. We'll end tonight's inaugural show of The Law and You with attorney Shellon Washington. Just on that, we will be back next week. We will talk about landlords and tenants and so forth. It's an interesting landlord-tenants, right? That love-hate relationship.
It's very interesting, especially in the state of New York with what happens. And a lot of landlords, a lot of small landlords, they're not very, learned as to what really happens when they purchase property in the state of New York. So I think it would be very enlightening for a lot of homeowners who have a 1, 2, or 3 family that they're renting to tenants.
We will deal with that in our second episode, which will be next week. It'll be interesting because I also want to hear about that landlord tenants and so forth situation. Hopefully some of my past landlords wouldn't be watching and say, hey, Mark. Yeah, but that's a serious situation that we will be dealing with next week. For those of you who are now joining us, this is an inaugural program of The Law and You with attorney at law Shellon Washington, based in New York. Office is on Utica Avenue, 455 Utica Avenue, Suite 2R, Brooklyn, New York, and its office number is 718-877-3100. Areas in which she practices medical malpractice, personal injuries, divorce, landlord, and tenant. Anything quickly before we wrap up tonight's program? I'll give you the last word. Since it's your inaugural program, it's your show. The last word.
Yeah, I want to thank everyone for tuning into this show where it's very informative and educating you on the laws in the state of New York. And from time to time, I will touch on issues as it relates to Guyana. Thank you all for joining us, and I hope to see you again soon.
Yes, absolutely. And thank you so much, Attorney Shellon Washington. Folks, feel free to get in touch with the attorney and ask whatever questions you may have, and also head down to her office and sit and talk about whatever case you may have in mind. Thank you so much, Attorney at Law. I appreciate your time, and to all of our viewers and listeners around the New York City area, I around Guyana, wherever you are. Keep in mind that Ms. Washington is also licensed to practice in Guyana and Trinidad and Tobago as well. Thank you, Ms. Washington.
Thank you, Mark, for having
Thank
me.
you all. So long.
Hello, this is attorney Shellon Washington, owner and founder of the Washington Law Firm, located at 455 Utica Avenue in Brooklyn, New York. We're specialized in medical malpractice, personal injuries, matrimonial law, and landlord and tenant. If you're in need of legal representation, please give us a call today. The number to call is 718-877-3100. Consultation is free at no cost to you. So call us today to see if we can be of any assistance to your legal needs. Again, the phone number to call us is 718-877-3100.